Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Goebel, and I am the host of Taking Questions. And I am thrilled today to introduce you to Mika Simmons, who is an award-winning filmmaker. She's an actress, but most importantly for us at Women S, she is the writer and host of a podcast called The Happy Vagina. Welcome, Mika.
Thank you so much for having me. One of my biggest ambitions is to make it in America. So this is like, I'm like, okay, hi, America.
Well, America, meet Mika. And I have to say, as we've been researching menopause in the UK, it seems like you are so far ahead of the United States in having this conversation. And so we are excited to bring some of those learnings over to the UK, and certainly the idea of being an activist for talking about these issues, which you are. And I would love to hear what made you become an activist in this space.
It's funny you talk about America being behind us, actually, because on my podcast with Gwyneth Paltrow, she mentioned being in perimenopause, and like, I'm not surprised that Gwyneth is open because that's so much of her USP. But I was surprised that as an American woman, she was so open. I think one of the things that the British and the Americans share is a slightly kind of secretive shame bubble around some of our sexual and female health in terms of gynecological, sexual and reproductive health. So we definitely share that. I think we're sort of on the same page, but where the menopause is concerned, there's a lot of work being done here to fight for legislative change at government level to mean that women are better protected in terms of if they need time off work, just a deep level of respect for actually what happens to women in that space. And I have done some activism around the menopause. I'm just starting my perimenopause, so there are other women.
Welcome to the group.
Thank you. There are some women I'm surrounded by who are further along. So Meg Matthews and Lisa Snowdon, Judy Graham, British women who are really kind of charging because they're a little, just 6 months older than me. Mm-hmm. So I have done some activism around menopause, but I guess my journey into being an activist started. I had a delayed reaction to losing my mother to ovarian cancer. Mm-hmm. So she died in 2000. She was 54 years old. She was diagnosed with fibroids, and then it was like cystitis, et cetera, all the things that happen with ovarian cancer, which is one of the most misunderstood cancers. Mm-hmm. People call it the silent killer. I've stopped saying that because I actually think when I found out that the ovaries were only like discovered and named in the 19th century, I don't think we can call a disease that was only discovered in of an organ that was only discovered in the 19th century. I don't think we can call that a silent killer because it hasn't been given its due. So mum had all the symptoms that didn't get properly treated, and she died quite quickly. She was my best friend.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was a life-changing moment. And I grew up in a family of activists, really. Mm-hmm. My mum was a feminist. My dad was a feminist. I grew up surrounded by human beings that believed they could change the world. So that sense was in me. I'd rejected it a bit when I was younger, but I'd just come out of university and drama school when mum died. And that losing her, it reignited my fervor for change. That said, it did take me 10 years before I got going. And I think my grief was unprocessable somehow at that age. There was a whole load of stuff that there was no one around me who'd also lost a parent, because I was in my late 20s. So it was kind of, I think if it happens at a more standard time, then your best friend or someone would have lost a parent. And I just kept it all inside. I didn't, if I'm honest, it was too painful to access.
Yeah.
I couldn't couldn't access it. So for about 10 years, I went a bit off the rails, lost my way a bit. I mean, I've always been a pretty great human being. It wasn't like I super went off the rails, but I wasn't as present and as focused as I became 10 years later. And I think really it was a fusion of things, which is that, so my very first thing that I did in the female health space was this like miracle happened. So my next door neighbor in my apartment in London, who is a British born Indian heritage woman who got a double first from Cambridge University, and she'd been sponsored by Avon to do her research into breast cancer, and then had become interested in ovarian cancer. So 10 years after losing my mum, I'm on the hallway outside of my house and outside of our flats, because we live next door to each other, and she's popping up the stairs and we're having this sort of bit of banter on the stairs, and somehow we got onto my mum not being around anymore. And she said, and I told her mum had gone from ovarian cancer, and she said, that's what I want to spend my life changing, is ovarian cancer. And so that was a moment. She then applied for a role at the Royal Marsden, which is the third most successful cancer research hospital in the world. And she was the first woman and the youngest person to ever get this role as head of oncology for gynecological cancers and research at the Royal Marsden. So that was, she told me she got the job. And then about 2 weeks later, she kind of knocked on my door and was like, there's no money for research. Can you help? So I brought a mini army of women together we created a charity, which is called Lady Garden Foundation, which is only a British-based charity for the red tape of it. We can't get into America with it. And that's been hugely successful and a great joy. And we've created, one of the drugs that we funded is a medication called olaparib, which has become one of the leading medications that treats ovarian cancer. So that's amazing. And then we've made a lot of noise as well. And that noise really was my thing, was the bit about kind of the awareness, making sure women knew what the symptoms were and all that sort of stuff. And I guess at some stage, about 5 or 6 years into that work with my foundation, I actually realized I was losing my way a bit. I'm an actress and a filmmaker by trade, and I was being so drawn into the charity world, and I could feel a resentment brewing, actually, even though I was I'd be out and I'd be sat next to someone like at lunch or something, like, oh, so amazing what you're doing with your charity. And I just think, because it was taking over my life. So I tried to work out how I could use my skills as an entertainer and as someone who likes to bring joy and laughter and entertainment to people with my work as an activist. And that was how the Happy Vagina podcast was born. I fused my activism and the charity with my desire, as you can tell, to chat quite a lot.
Well, I love it. I always say life pushes you in the direction that you're supposed to go. And literally you walk out your door and there is life telling you this is what you need to be doing. And in a space where all of us, we're all in it together. You talked about your girlfriends and how they're a few months ahead of you. You know, no woman is exempt from going through menopause. Sure, all of us may have different symptoms. Some of us may not suffer as much from the night sweats. Some of us may not, have the brain fog. But we are all going to go through it, and it is still such a taboo subject. So I applaud people like you, and at Women Nest, we applaud women like you that are championing this topic for us. But it's still a taboo. And you come up against it when you're doing your podcast and marketing and talking about it with the media. Sometimes we even get blocked on some of our channels when we're talking about some of our health products for the vagina and talking about our vibrators. We'll get a kickback saying, nope, you can't talk about it. How do you circumvent that?
Well, I kind of think it's quite fun.
You're like, challenge accepted.
I mean, so firstly, mostly I have been impacted across media platforms. So if I go on the radio in the UK on Sunday, I'm on the Laura Whitmore show to talk about women's stuff for International Women's Day, and they will delete me saying the happy vagina if I say it, because the BBC don't want me to say vagina on air.
It's a medical term.
I know. The podcast, I definitely think, gets pushed to the back if people don't want that, you know. So for example, my host Acast, I've always wondered why they don't promote it on their Instagram feed, because it's a very successful podcast. And then Instagram is really, and literally just 10 minutes ago, I've put up a post. I've just done I like to whisper to my community. I go, the last post has been pulled back because I said vagina, and then everyone likes it and it goes viral. So I try to stay light about it. I think it's not worth being antagonistic with something that's out of our control. And I don't think there's some man in a tower, some like the patriarchal god going, oh no, you can't say vagina, let's move that away. I think we're the victims of an algorithm that tracks things and maybe finds 3 words. So my last post was about just yesterday, this 15-week abortion ban is coming to Florida. So there's probably a few things in that post that got flagged. So, and then the other thing that I would say about it is that I feel deeply respectful of children. And while there's a very strong movement towards making sure that children use anatomical words, we're in the minority, those in this space, and it's growing. And I firmly believe eventually it will grow to everyone, and young people will say penis rather than willy, and vagina or vulva rather than fanny. In America, fanny's a bum, rather than coochie. You know, like, I really do believe we'll get there. But, you know, coming back to going on the radio, you know, if a mother is in the car with her child, and then two other children of a parent that she doesn't know that well, and I say vagina on the radio, and that mother is in a situation where a child that is not hers is asking her what that means because she hasn't heard it before. So I feel a little respectful, and I think that with Instagram also, there's no wall. So, you know, your 3-year-old can be looking through, not that a 3-year-old is going to be a 5 or 6-year-old can be looking through and see. I don't think vagina is that relevant for that, because I think they wouldn't really take in what it is. But some of my posts are quite racy. My Halloween pumpkin said CUNT on it.
I love that.
So I think it's about not forcing. It's about kicking the can down the road, having fun with it, having joy with it, pushing but not forcing. Really important. You know, it's like quality of curiosity, testing, seeing if we can change things. And the reason that I do it like that, Anne, is because as the most amazing woman, one of the most amazing women who ever lived, said, fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that other people will come with you. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that. And that's really, really important, that we don't ostracize Instagram so they put a ban on it completely, or a man who feels like there's no in. You know, my posts are quite, they're not anti-men, but they're a little down on the patriarchy. So that's how I feel about it, really. I feel like you know, it's really important, the work that Womaness and the Happy Vagina are doing. We must do it. Don't get angry about it. And be respectful. Be aware that these platforms are free. Instagram is a free platform that you're running your business from. I'm not a business, we're a community, and they have been given to us for free. And I would actually just come back to your first question when I said it took me 10 years to find my way as an activist. One of the main reasons that I was able to become an activist is because of social media. Because it was when my first campaign for Lady Garden, where we had a Lady Garden t-shirt and hundreds of celebs posted it and stuff. It was really fun. And it went viral. It was one of the first charity campaigns to go viral on Instagram. And, you know, I'd always wanted to do something in the activist space. I'd always wanted to have a voice. I'd always wanted to make change, but it was quite black and white. You were like either a politician or you're an actor. Now, because of social media, because we can own our own creative space and make as much noise as we want to. And I think, therefore, be respectful of Instagram as well. You know, like be a friend to it.
I like that. And at Women-S, our whole mission is about hashtag menopausitivity. So everything that we're doing, we're trying to do in the positive space as well, and trying to affect change in a positive way. So let's talk a little bit about one of the questions that I had was, how can you possibly tell someone else, and I heard this on your podcast, how can you possibly tell someone else what you want if you don't know yourself? So we're talking about sexual health there. And, you know, there is no such thing as normal. And pardon my pun, there is no such thing as one size fits all.
No.
But as a woman, you do have to know what you want in order to get what you want. So in your opinion, how can women best explore this space and figure out what they want?
Well, the first step, I mean, I'm not a sex expert. So I've had the huge gift of being surrounded by women who come on my podcast or other activists who actually have got qualifications in this space. So really, I stand on the shoulder of giants, and pretty much everything I've learned from them. And actually, at the beginning of lockdown, I did a little mini season with Kate Moyle, who's a sexual wellness therapist. And I learned so much in those 3 episodes. And I guess regardless, outside of those learnings, what I always knew was that shame is the real opposition for us as human beings, and that shame can be deeply hidden. I mean, we can be functioning and think we don't like something and not even realize that that's because it's from a place of shame. Mm-hmm. So the starting point for anyone who does not have a good relationship with themselves, their soul, themselves, their body, or their sexual organs, their genitals, would be to do a bit of a, pardon the pun, deep dive into, you know, is there some shame there? Who told you that you shouldn't look at yourself in the mirror? Who told you that if you go to the swimming baths, you shouldn't get changed in front of someone? Who told you that masturbation is not okay? You know. And then within that, I would also say that it's okay if it's not for you. So that's kind of my second top tip on it, is go and explore, but make sure you're overcoming any personal or hereditary that you've inherited shame, and then be really okay with, you know, not everyone orgasms, not everyone really wants to do self-pleasure. But coming back to your question on that, I do really believe that in terms of communicating our desires within a sexual relationship with a partner, we do have to get to know our own bodies and what pleases us first. And only then can we really, either verbally or physically by moving, communicate what we want. And I think that there is an absolute, you know, historical blanket silencing of women that's happened in terms of the fact that we should even expect to have pleasure from sex. And I'm pretty sure it stemmed from the church. So marriage and children is the greatest way to try and control human beings. Genuinely, when they started, before the agricultural revolution, which was when really we started to come into homes and have the family unit that we see today. Men and women were more tribal. So the women were all together, the men were all together. Often the women wouldn't know which one was the dad. They'd have the babies together. And then when the men came back from hunting, they'd decide which man they wanted to be with for that season. And then as we became domesticated and the church started to bring in these institutions of marriage and that you have to have a child, we became trapped by a need to make money in order to pay for that family, keep the women at home because you can't earn and have the children, look after the children. And I mean, it's probably another podcast, it's probably another interview, but the importance of it is that at that same time that the church started to, I'm not anti-church, by the way, I'm a deeply spiritual human being, and I don't go to church, but I'm really all-encompassing in terms of religions and faith. But I do strongly believe that the doctrine of the Catholic and the Christian church embedded in the family unit a assumption that women did not need to have pleasure from sex, because really sex was about having babies and children, and this family unit that I was just referring to, that somehow or other that was what we were here to do.
Right.
And it kept us down as human beings. It kept us down. They got rid of the witches, the soothsayers, and so I think, really understanding as a woman that if you haven't had pleasure and if you haven't learned how to self-pleasure, it is likely that that's because there's a deep-rooted belief that you were told through your ancestral line that that's not what was meant for you, and it's just not true. And I mostly, and then sex education, of course, which is like that from the church stuff stems into the fact that then in sex education we get taught about periods, and it's like, what about
you have these women who in with womeness, on top of all of that, their vaginas are becoming drier. Their libido isn't there like it used to be. There's more issues now that are piling on for her. And so how can we encourage her to continue to talk about this, to talk about it with her girlfriends, to talk about it to her doctor, to talk about it with her lover? This is something that we have to encourage her to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I'm not there yet. So these are the things that I've heard that I like, that I find, and as you said, everyone's different. But so apparently self-pleasure and masturbation really helps. So if you're not doing it and you're in or heading into menopause, masturbation and self-pleasure in order to keep to keep vaginal atrophy at bay is something that I have been told is really important. So getting a vibrator and maybe getting a lube to help with that vibrator. I would suggest to ease yourself in. And also the other thing, just because of all the things we've talked about so far, around that women have not expected pleasure, it's 20 to 40 minutes for a woman on average. Okay, there's going to be the girlfriend that does it in 3. Good for her.
Good for her.
Good for you. God's chosen one.
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
Probably,
no one likes you. Good for you.
But like 20 to 40 minutes, so like this takes time. It needs focus. You need to like really deeply respect your body. And so if you haven't been and you're in menopause, get started. Start looking into self-pleasure. Get a vibrator. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of using vibrators all the time. I would strongly recommend that women mix it up. I think hands are really important. But I think that they can be quick. And, if you want to get into a rhythm of actually making sure that you don't time yourself out, it can be, if you're very busy, as we all are, and you've only got a few minutes, you can think, I won't bother. But actually vibrators are great for that. And then they're also great for penetration too, which is something that if you're not with a partner or you want to self-pleasure without your partner, you need an instrument. So I'd say self-pleasure is a really great way to overcome some of the symptoms that come on. It's also really great for pain. I mean, the endorphins that are released and the dopamine from you don't even have to have an orgasm. You don't even have to have an orgasm. You can literally just have some self-pleasure and get all these results. To be honest with you, Kate Moyle, therapist who I talked about, told me that you just got to give yourself a hug. You get dopamine from giving yourself skin hug. I'm like, oh, this is
I'll be touching myself all day.
I know.
So, that's great.
Yeah.
And I think the entertainment industry has done an amazing job of celebrating women, of this demographic, of this age. I just applaud them for it. You recently spoke with Lena Headey, who is an amazing actress. She was Cersei on Game of Thrones. My personal crush is a woman named Hannah Winningham, who is on Ted Lasso.
Oh yes, she's amazing.
She is amazing, and my personal female crush, and she actually was also on Game of Thrones. She was the woman who was doing the shame against Cersei as she was doing the walk of shame. But now she's on Ted Lasso, and she plays this wonderful character who is almost 50 years old. She's newly divorced. And she sort of is going through this moment of feeling badly for herself. But now, for me, she's this inspiration because she's making this new life for herself with this soccer team, and she is a gorgeous woman, and she shows up dressed and beautiful. And I sort of went through this period of sitting on my sofa in the sweatpants, and then I see her on screen, and I'm like, oh, she is my inspiration. And so you've been talking to some of these actresses, and tell me, is there any advice that they've given you that you've loved about being at this stage in life?
I actually feel mostly that the honesty actually makes me feel quite emotional. The tenderness and the honesty and the fierceness of the women that come on my podcast, specifically in the bracket you're talking about. So Lena, Gwyneth Paltrow, Andrea McLean, who are all women in their late 40s, coming into early 50s. And the insight that they have into themselves is so exquisite. Gwyneth has this beautiful moment where I asked her how she stayed resilient in the face of, I feel, a lot of judgment. I mean, I'm
for sure.
She's my girl crush. She knows it. She's like, oh, stop it. But like, how you keep going in the face of it. And I just thought her answer was really beautiful. She said, I just want women to be comfortable with themselves, and they don't have to like what I'm doing, but what I'm doing is creating a space, pushing the boundaries, as Anne, we spoke about before, so that people can find their niche.
Sure.
They don't have to do my way. And I just think, and Lena also talked about playing a stripper and how uncomfortable it was for her, but that she embraced it. I mean, this was last year. She was like, what am I doing? I've got 2 kids at 6 o'clock in the morning on set. Andrea McLean talked about how and her partner, after she had quite an early hysterectomy, actually, Andrea had an early hysterectomy, so had very early, very fast onset of menopause after that, and how her and her partner found their way back to their sexual relationship. And I think so, very different. They're very different episodes where we talk about really different things, but each of them brought an exquisiteness in terms of the way they spoke about things, the way they perceived their relationship to the world, how they perceived the world outside of their relationship to it. And I just, it heals me, it heals me to have women talk in that way. It's and it's different talking to the young women. Like, I had some younger women on, always I mix it up, but like they were like, oh, we just can't stop eating rice cakes. Corn cakes, and they've got so many calories in them, and I'm like, okay. And then another one's like, we've got to take the patriarchy down. And what you get with the Happy Vagina podcast and the work that I'm doing, because it's very international, and it's very cross age groups and generations, and cultural and social standing, and it means that, you know, you just get a real variety. I mean, I have to keep myself in check a bit, Anne, because so I'm just putting together the season 5 list, and I do notice that, like, you know, I'm basically, I'm going to ask Gloria Steinman again. I've asked her 5 times. But what I have to be careful, because what you're referring to in terms of these women of a slightly perimenopause age and on, they're the ones that I want to talk to.
Yes.
Because I'm like, oh, thank you, you've just like changed my whole outlook, because I'm going through that, and I've got to be really careful to make sure that we have a lot of younger women in the happy vagina community too. So yeah.
Well, we put it out to our community that I was going to be speaking with you, and one of the questions was, what makes your vagina happy?
Oh, stop it.
You knew you were going to get that. What makes your vagina happy? Well, listen,
I think my answer, no, I do want to answer it. I think I'm single at the moment. And so I think deep acceptance, you know, coming through a pandemic without a partner and being forced to kind of accept my lot. So that does go into my pleasure relationship with myself. I've had to kind of go, okay, that's what it is for now. And I think that deep acceptance has given me great joy and pleasure in the last 18 months.
That is inspiring and very, very nice to hear. So you are coming out with a book.
I have got a book coming out, yes. It was meant to be out in May. They've moved it to August. It's already online. You can pre-order it already. I'm so nervous. It's my first book, and it is the Happy Vagina book. So it is basically a whole load of really inspiring and fun facts about the history of women's gynecological, reproductive, and sexual health, about periods, about orgasms, about a bit of sort of BDSM, a bit of, you know, and then self-esteem. The whole back section is about self-esteem. It's kind of like the podcast and the Instagram in a book. And it's like what we call a loo book in the UK, you know, it's a toilet book. So I don't think it will live there, but it's one of those books that you can just open up and just grab a bit of information from. It's really bright. It's heavily illustrated, and it doesn't run super deep. There's a list at the back of the books that I read to get. So yeah, it's not a deep dive of thoroughness into, but I also feel like that's already been done. Like there's quite a lot of really, like there's Vagina, a Re-Education by a mate of mine, Lynn Enright, which is an amazing book, really goes into the deep about why history started to, you know, talk about the hymen and the way that it does, and virginity and all those things. And I just pulled out the loud bits and put them in a book. And what I really hope more than anything is that women are going to give it to the people that aren't interested in podcasts and aren't on social media, because that's really where my voice is at the moment, other than the press that I do, is on social media and the podcast. And there's a lot of women that aren't really interested in that stuff. So I just got this like vision of it being given at hen parties and at menopause parties.
And those have
days.
Galentine's Day is what we call it here. With your girls. Yes. And we've been doing that at Women-S, where we are supporting women and we're sending product for them to try and make a party out of it. So absolutely. Let's when the book comes out, we would love to help support you.
I'd love that. It's available for download now, even at Barnes & Noble. I mean, it's everywhere. It's all over the world. It's in every single country, available to download already, and Amazon. I'm like, oh, it's terrifying.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Yeah. So on behalf of Women-S and certainly the after party, I want to thank you for taking your time and joining me on this interview. This was really so much fun.
I've had such a nice time.
We appreciate everything that you are doing in this space for women.
Well, I'm looking forward to developing a deeper relationship with Womaness.
Wow. We are too. We are too. So thank you very much, Mika.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.